Okay, so now we've recorded our reactions to the text. We've thought a little bit about what the main idea is, what evidence is being used to support it. The last two things to do are to inquire about the organization of the text and to ask some questions of it, or of any patterns that we see in it. So what we see in this text is that it begins with this sort of fairy tale opening. Once upon a time, it immediately gives us a concrete study which is meant to introduce us to the situation. This is a really good technique to think about and try to emulate. Often, beginning with something very specific like this is a good way to introduce readers to a broader, more abstract principle. It's a lot easier for us to understand right off the bat what scope insensitivity is when we immediately have this illustration of it to work with. We can see right away from reading this, there's something a little bit strange going on, in that there seems to be almost no connection between the number of birds saved and the willingness that people are to pay. So that really helps us to understand. It gives us like a hook into the main argument. Another important thing to recognize here is the way in which the author gives their work the title that has to do with some technical concept, but then explains what it means very quickly. This is important because you don't want your reader to be hanging around too long in the dark about some crucial topic in your paper. You don't want to really bury the lead here. This is quite a short text, so it's very dense. It's really just rattling off example, and attempts to try to explain the seeming paradox about not matching our actions to the effect that our actions would have. So the way in which the paper is organized is pretty straightforward. The moral is here at the end, and saving your main point to the end makes sense in a short paper like this. If this was a long 20-page work or longer, then waiting until the final paragraph to say what the main purpose is, what the takeaway message for your audience is maybe not a great idea. But here, because it's so short, you can trust that the reader's going to hang on up until this point. It actually has probably a greater impact to have the moral of the text right at the end than to have the takeaway message at the beginning in something of this length. So those are some things about the way that the information is organized that we can learn for ourselves. Now, let's ask a few questions of this paper. Let's think about something that might be interesting or odd, something that we could develop into an essay of our own. It's often through asking questions of a text like this that we develop the raw material of our future essay topics. So let's just think a little bit about any questions that might come to mind. So one thing that occurs to me is this still accurate? The studies are old. Do recent studies corroborate this claim? The article's from 2007, I believe, so it's been a while. I wonder if anything's come up in the past 13 years that would contradict or complicate the situation that Yudkowsky is referring to. Do we still see evidence for scope insensitivity? Okay, so this could be something that we do in a future essay. We look for more recent studies and we say, Yudkowsky's point here is still important to reckon with when we're thinking about morality, because recent studies demonstrate that this is still something that appears. It seems to be a true influence on human decision making. Another question that occurs here. Is Yudkowsky looking at moral questions in the right way? So we can think about the focus that Yudkowsky has on the consequences of our actions. His claim is that if we have bigger and better consequences, we should be more willing to do something. If we know that our money can save more lives, we should be willing to give more money. Is this really the way that most of us think about morality? Is this the way that we should think about morality? Should we measure it in this almost AI-like way that Yudkowsky recommends? Is that really the best way to do it? Or is he getting something wrong about morality more generally? What are the limitations of this consequentialist approach to ethics? What are the benefits? Are there any situations in which acting in a way that seems to have the greatest effect on the largest number of people or sentient beings unethical according to other theories of moral action? I don't really know here, and in fact my inclination is actually to be on Yudkowsky's side here. I tend to take this perspective when thinking about ethics, but many people do not, and they may have good reasons to do so. So maybe there's something wrong with Yudkowsky's premises here, and maybe scope insensitivity is not as big a problem as he suggests. I don't know if that's the case, but it's certainly possible. Another question that occurs to me is, if people really do exhibit scope insensitivity, then how should organizers of NGOs or charities or other important causes change their messaging, marketing, or appeal to people? How can they get people to donate to the most effective causes? If it really is the case that people don't care so much about the numbers when thinking about charitable giving, this seems like it should have some impact on how charities or NGOs go about promoting what they do. Maybe numbers are not really the best way to do it. Maybe more of an emphasis on human stories is important. So maybe we can think of, is there a concrete example in recent times where we see scope insensitivity at work? I wonder if there's some disaster or crisis or something like that which impacts a large number of people, which for some reason no one's doing very much about. Maybe because the messaging around it, the optics are not good. Maybe there's something we can learn from Yudkowsky's paper to help generate a better response to those type of problems. So this seems like a pretty good set of questions for now. I'm sure we could keep going and raise lots of other interesting issues or other potential paper topics, but this seems like a good place to finish up here. As a result of this close reading, I've now engaged carefully with the text. I feel like I have a good understanding of what Yudkowsky was talking about. Oh, I realized I misspelled his name here. And now I have a good set of questions as well that I could start to build into an essay that responds to this paper, that uses it in some way. In the future, we'll think a little bit more about what we can do next, how we can take this sort of raw material and start to move in the direction of a more well-developed set of ideas for a paper. Thanks for now.